March 23rd, 2011, Los Angeles. At Cedars-Sinai Hospital, a woman was taking her final breath. She was 79 years old. She had mesmerized the world with her violet eyes. She had been married 8 times, won 2 Oscars. She was Hollywood's last queen. Elizabeth Taylor died that day, the star of Cleopatra, the soul of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. But the real story was behind the bright screen, because Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just beautiful, she was powerful, and she suffered her entire life, used as a child, betrayed as an adult. She gave everything for love but never found happiness. 8 marriages, 8 failed loves, and in the end she took her last breath alone in a hospital room. Before we reveal the tragic truth behind Hollywood's most beautiful star, hit subscribe for more shocking untold stories of legends who lived for love but died alone. Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor was born on February 27, 1932 in London. Her family was American, but her father ran an art gallery in London. Elizabeth was a beautiful baby. She had violet eyes, truly violet, a very rare genetic trait. Her mother Sarah was determined to make her daughter a star. Elizabeth started ballet lessons when she was only 3 years old. In 1939, World War II broke out. The family returned to America, settled in Los Angeles. When Elizabeth was 9, she went to an audition for a film, Lassie Come Home. It was a small role, but the director saw those violet eyes and was stunned. The film was successful. MGM Studios noticed Elizabeth. In 1944 came National Velvet. Elizabeth played a girl who loved horses. She was 12 years old, but her performance was mature. The film was a huge hit. Elizabeth Taylor became a star overnight. But MGM used Elizabeth like a machine, just like Judy Garland. She made films constantly, was put on diets. You need to be thinner for the camera. But they didn't give Elizabeth pills like they did Judy, because Elizabeth was stronger. She learned to say no at an early age. In 1949 came Little Women. Elizabeth was 17. She was no longer a child star. She was a young woman, beautiful, mature, captivating. Men started falling in love with her. Hollywood wanted her. In 1950, she dated her first marriage to Conrad Nicky 8 Hilton Jr., the Holto billionaire's son. Elizabeth was 18 years old. It was a lavish wedding, MGM production. But before the honeymoon was even over, the marriage cracked. Nicky was an alcoholic. He gambled. He was violent toward Elizabeth. 9 months later, they divorced. Elizabeth's first marriage was a disaster. In 1952, she married for the second time to Twitter acting Michael Wilding. Michael was 20 years older than Elizabeth, but he was kind, gentle. They had 2 sons, Michael Jr. and Christopher. For a few years, they seemed happy, but Elizabeth got bored. Michael is too passive, she'd say. The love is gone. They divorced in 1957. The same year came her third marriage to producer Mike Todd. Mike was passionate, wealthy, full of life. He loved Elizabeth madly. They had a daughter, Lisa Todd. Elizabeth later said, "Mike was the only real love of my life." But happiness didn't last long. On March 22, 1958, Mike Todd's private plane crashed. In New Mexico, 4 people were on board. All died. Mike Todd was 48 years old. Elizabeth was devastated. She was pregnant but had a miscarriage. She stayed in depression for months. "I don't want to live anymore," she'd say. But then a friend came to support her, Eddie Fisher. Eddie was a famous singer and Mike Todd's closest friend. He was also married to Debbie Reynolds, Hollywood's most beloved couple. Eddie consoled Elizabeth, stayed by her side, but consolation turned into love. In 1959, Elizabeth and Eddie started a relationship. It became a scandal. Debbie Reynolds was pregnant and home with the children. Eddie left her. The media condemned Elizabeth, called her a homewrecker, immoral. But Elizabeth didn't care. "I fight for love," she said. In 1959, Eddie divorced Debbie, married Elizabeth, 4th marriage. But this one wouldn't last long either. In 1960, Elizabeth got the biggest role of her career, Cleopatra. 20th Century Fox was making the most expensive film in history. Budget $44 million. Elizabeth would play Cleopatra. She'd get $1 million, the highest fee ever paid to a female actor at that time. Filming began in Rome, but Elizabeth got sick, pneumonia. She nearly died. Production was halted. Millions were lost. Elizabeth recovered. Filming resumed. And on set, she met Richard Burton. Richard Burton was a Welsh actor, married, father of two, but Richard and Elizabeth were consumed by passion the moment they looked at each other. They flirted on set. Everyone noticed. Then they started seeing each other secretly. Paparazzi took photos. The scandal exploded worldwide. Elizabeth wrecked another marriage. Even the Vatican commented, declared Elizabeth an immoral woman. In 1963, she divorced Eddie Fisher. Richard Burton also divorced his wife. In 1964, Elizabeth and Richard married. Fifth marriage. Their love was fiery, but also toxic. They constantly fought. Through glasses. Then they'd make up and make love passionately. Richard drank, so did Elizabeth. They'd make a film, it would be famous. Then they'd make another film. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? 1966. Both were magnificent. Elizabeth won her second Oscar. Richard was nominated but didn't win. But the marriage was rotting. They divorced in 1974. Only 10 months later, in 1975, they remarried. Sixth marriage. But this time it was even worse. 9 months later, they divorced again. Elizabeth and Richard loved each other, but they couldn't stay together. In 1976 came the seventh marriage, to politician John Warner. John was a Virginia senator, serious, conservative. Elizabeth tried to be a political wife, but she hated it. Boring, she'd say. I can't be myself. She gained weight, fell into depression, took pills. They divorced in 1982. In 1991 came the eighth and final marriage, to construction worker Larry Fortensky. Elizabeth was 59, Larry was 39. They married at Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch, but this marriage also failed. They divorced in 1996. 8 marriages, all 8 ended. Elizabeth vowed she would never marry again. In the 2000s, Elizabeth retired. She no longer made films. Her health was poor, heart problems, back pain, diabetes. But she worked on charity, campaigned for AIDS awareness. In 1985, when her friend Rock Hudson died of AIDS, Elizabeth took action. She founded the AIDS Foundation, raised millions. I'm doing this for Rock, she'd say. In early 2011, she was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. She was admitted to Cedar Sinai Hospital. Her children were by her side, but there was no husband, because there wasn't one anymore. On the morning of March 23, 2011, Elizabeth Taylor died. She was 79 years old. Elizabeth Taylor was Hollywood's last queen. She married 8 times, fell in love 8 times, was disappointed 8 times. But she never gave up. I live for love, she'd say. Life without love is meaningless. Perhaps the most tragic part was this. Elizabeth searched for love her entire life, but she never found real happiness. Men wanted her, but none of them truly understood her. Richard Burton came closest, but even he wasn't enough. Elizabeth Taylor was famous for her beauty, but nobody saw the loneliness inside. Those violet eyes saw so much, but they never saw happiness. Years later, her son Michael said, "My mother was the strongest woman I ever knew, but she was also the loneliest." And that was the truth. Elizabeth Taylor had everything: fame, fortune, beauty, talent. But the one thing she wanted most, she never had. A love that lasted. She gave her heart 8 times, and 8 times it was broken. Maybe that's why, in her final years, she stopped looking for love in men. She found it in her children, in her grandchildren, in her charity work. She found purpose in helping others, especially AIDS patients who were abandoned by society. Elizabeth used her fame for good, raised awareness, saved lives. In that way, she finally found meaning beyond the movies, beyond the marriages. But still, on that March morning in 2011, when she took her last breath, there was no husband holding her hand, just her children, and memories of 8 loves that couldn't survive. Elizabeth Taylor lived 79 years, and in those years, she lived more than most people could in 10 lifetimes. She loved deeply, she fought fiercely, she never apologized for who she was. The world remembers her violet eyes, her beauty, her glamour. But the real Elizabeth Taylor was more than that. She was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who refused to be broken no matter how many times her heart shattered. And in the end, that's the legacy she left behind. Not 8 failed marriages, but the courage to keep loving even when love kept failing.